Bernie. The FBI calling. Now, Bernie, how you supposed to be for the poor people and you under investigation for bank fraud? Now, Bernie, I thought you was broke, Bernie. Okay, Bernie. Bernie, I can't bail you out, Bernie. I cannot bail you out, Bernie. Oh, Lord. Okay, I'm done.
Well, good morning. This is Lou Benninger, and you're listening to Live with Lou. And we're out here on top of Mount Hood, Leon and I, and we're going to try to make a go of it today. And last week when it was 92 in here or something like that? It was like smoking. It was like, yeah. Somebody complained. They said, Lou, we could actually hear the cars going down the road. I said, man, the place was like, we hardly could do a show last week. It was so hot in here. No air conditioning. It was horrible. But today, I hope it's better. It's not so bad, and we don't even have the air going yet. But we're out here on top of Mount Hood in East Yuba County, out here in Northern California. So you folks out there in Butte County, Colusa County, Nevada County, Placer County, Sacramento County, Sutter County, you might be able to hear all you may be able to hear, like over in Sutter or out there a little farther. Some of you may be able to hear pretty clearly. If you can't hear so hot, you can go to KMYCradio.com. That's KMYCradio.com, and you can listen live stream, and it's all nice and tidy over there, not scratching, interference, free of interference. So we're here from 9 to noon. We are talking live today. We're talking for food today. And so if you want to call in, you can at 530-742-5555. This is a pro-choice program, so if I need to abort the call because it's not convenient or it's not to my satisfaction or the wrong gender, I might have to abort the call. And sometimes some of you call and want to talk about, I think some of you call and want to just be on the radio. So in that case, just get your own show. But if you have a question or something, a comment that what we're talking on right now, we'll deal with it. Otherwise, I got more than I can do to in fact, I got lots more information I can talk about today. So I'm happy you're listening. And if you're not listening, I'm happy you're not listening. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. We're sponsored by some of my friends that like what I do. And so the nice thing about America, if you don't like what I do, you don't have to send me any money. That's different than the government, who then takes your money and does whatever they want with it. So if you don't like what I'm doing, like, for instance, they take your money and they support the National Endowment for the Arts that I don't like, but they take it anyway. So we're not forcing you to listen or to send me money. But if you want to send me money, you can. But we're sponsored also by Dr. J. Trump's Butt Hurt Salve, special formula number 45. It's in the huge can. Quality guaranteed. Believe me, soothes the sting of massive butt hurt resulting from unexpected defeat and exposure to raw truth. So if you want a can of this, you can kind of Google it, butt hurt salve, and you can apply it liberally for 8 years. We're going to send a case to Obama since he's used to having salve on his butt. Do you notice all these characters that you liberals thought were God's gift to politics are all criminals? You know, the person, the Obama couple that were so always talking about the poor and their care for the poor and how they're concerned about the poor. Even the Democrats, the liberals, are getting concerned because they're spending millions of dollars flying, globetrotting around, going to the most exotic, expensive places in the world. A lot different than Jimmy Carter when he was defeated for president in his second term, and he went and joined people like Habitat for Humanity and just tried to help people. and taught Sunday school. A little bit different than the Obamas, right? So you see the true colors coming out when they got the lots of cash in their pocket because they paid off a lot of people during the 8 years that they were in the White House. People like fundraisers for them. Like remember the half $1 billion that Solyndra got and then filed bankruptcy right afterwards? And then people like Eric Holder, who's the only attorney general that ever was found in contempt, right? Violated the law himself. The leading law enforcement guy was a violator of the law, a liar. And then his backup, Loretta Lynch, same. She's going to come and testify next before the committee with the House investigations regarding all the lies and impropriety regarding the Clinton emails. You know, you can just go on and go down the list, and they're all criminals, right? So there's probably a great need for the butt hurt salve out there, so we like to bring that up. And so we're a part of the, you know, I thought we'd be done with Obama when we got done with him, but he's not done with us, right? He's not done with he's going to stir it up. He's going to undermine because he's really not for America. He's for Barack Obama. That's the difference between a lot of presidents, whether you like them or not. Usually they just serve and then they move on with their life because they had a life. Barack doesn't really have a life. Being a pervert from the beginning, he's still one. He's twisted in his head, and his wife is hooked right at the hip with him on that one. So I loved it this week. I noticed that the Justice Department, God, you know, I watched a 30-minute, in fact, I may play this in the future, chunks of it. Man, when you see all the rot, the cesspool and rot from the Obama administration piled together in a series of what they did, it's like sickening what they did to this country. And so one of the things they went after is, of all the things they could have done, we could have solved this. We could have stopped syphilis. We could have stopped AIDS. We could have stopped all kinds of wars. We could have stopped black men shooting black men. But no, there was more important things to fight in the country, like fighting the Washington Redskins over their name, because by golly, it was offensive to so many Americans that there's no way we're going to allow a pro or even a high school team to have a name that would have like Redskins. So they fought for years. They fought against the ownership of the Redskins, Washington Redskins, to force them to change their name. And this last week, the Justice Department, in a letter to the Federal Appeals Court, they dropped the case. And the reason is, this is fascinating. The case wasn't, the issue before the Supreme Court last week was Matal, M-A-T-A-L, versus Tam. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of there was an issue over an Asian American band, not a band of like a tribal band, but a musical band. An Asian American band wanted to call itself, or had called itself, the Slants. I'll just let you think about that. An Asian American band called themselves the Slants. And people sued them saying, you can't, that's a degrading name, but the band was calling themselves that. And so the Supreme Court ruled in favor of free speech, saying the Asian American band could call themselves the Slants. It was fine with the Supreme Court and with the Constitution. So since that was fine with the Supreme Court, the Justice Department then said, well, obviously, then the football team that resides in Washington, D.C. could call themselves the Redskins. So the Supreme Court found that Simon Tam could trademark the term Slants as the name of his band because it would be unconstitutional for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to discriminate against it or him, citing the First Amendment's free speech protection. The justices were unanimous in saying the 71-year-old trademark law, barring disparaging terms, infringes on free speech rights. Thank you, Jesus. So the Redskins owner, Dan Snyder, said last week he was thrilled by the Supreme Court's ruling on the Asian American ban. And lawyer Lisa Blatt said it resolves the team's dispute and vindicated its position. So thank God for people like Dan Snyder, who wasn't going to cave in to stupid stuff coming out of the Eric Holder, politically correct but criminal Attorney General's office. You know something? I don't know whether anybody's compiled all the lies of Obama, Barack Obama. The guy was just a prolific liar. And it just seemed like he collected them all around him. Eric Holder, every time he opened his mouth, he's just a prolific liar. For you and all of us, that means he lies all the time. I wanted to also mention this week that it's so interesting, all the people, people just love to hate Trump, right? They love to hate Trump. And particularly all these people, even these hypocritical Republicans who want a job in the White House, even though they trashed Trump, right? Said all manner of evil about him. And so even, they had this vote this week regarding Kate Steinle. You remember Kate Steinle? Kate Steinle was one of hundreds of people that have been murdered by illegal aliens. And so I don't know whether you remember, during the campaign, Brad Steinle, her brother, trashed Donald Trump. Because you remember Donald Trump was talking during the campaign about how we needed to build a wall. And the fact that you remember the first time he said this, I'll never forget it, because some of my friends who don't like Trump, they always misquote it. He began to say how the border was porous and that criminals, in other words, criminals, that means people that do criminal acts in Mexico or people that would be doing criminal acts in the United States, were coming across the border and committing crimes, and we needed to stop it. And he referred to rapists, molesters, murderers, etc. And people, lots of people, Mexicans, all different flavors, threw a big fit. Not all Mexicans. A lot of people love Trump. A lot of Mexicans love Trump. But they threw a big fit saying, he was saying that all Mexicans, right, the stereotype, all Mexicans, twisting his words, were criminals. And we need to bar them from this country because they were just bad, nasty people. He never actually said that. In fact, Donald Trump is a huge employer of all different folks, men, women, all kinds of people of different flavors. So anyway, this Brad Steinle being sensitive about his sister's death and how she'd be remembered and how her name would be used or misused, criticized Trump, trashed Trump for, in his words, using or misusing his sister as a political pawn. Now, generally, I would agree with Brad Steinle because most politicians talk trash on both sides of the aisle, R and D, and so they talk a good talk, and they use, and exploit people, parading them up to talk behind a pulpit or something, and then they really just kick them to the curb and never do anything about it. But the difference here is that if it wasn't for Donald Trump, this vote this week would have never happened. This thing called Kate's Law would have never been pushed through and got the support of even some Democrats. And the article says, by Neil Monroe, says that 24 House Democrats were pressured to vote for Kate's Law, showing how President Donald Trump may break the Democratic senators' blockade of the immigration reform bills. Now, it's interesting. This article talks about Democrats' blockade of any type of immigration reform but you hear them talk about all the time about, oh, we need to reform. We need comprehensive immigration reform. They're just a bunch of perverts and liars. And we can say that with confidence at the federal, state, and local level. They're just liars and perverts. Are there any exceptions? A few. But in order to talk about a lot of stuff today, I'm not going to take time to identify a few honest folks. Let's just go on and talk about what the problem is. In June 29th, a couple days ago, 166 Democrats voted against Kate's law, but 24 Democrats voted for the law, which raises potential jail sentence for repatriated illegals who then come back on into the United States. And the bill is named after Kate Steinle because of what happened to her. Now, she was murdered on July 1, 2015. That's when she was murdered. She was having a walk, if you remember, down near the waterfront with her father, and she was shot. A person didn't hate her and shoot her. He just randomly shot a gun, and the bullet hit her aorta and killed her pretty quickly. So this guy, the last name of Lopez Sanchez, like I tell the guys, the Mexican guys I work with in Yuba County Jail, I said, you guys need to pick a couple names instead of these four names. They got 4 or 5 names they use all the time. Anyway, the interesting thing about the Kate Steinle murder, or manslaughter, whatever they wanted to call it, this fellow had just finished serving a 4-year federal prison sentence for illegally reentering the country. He was turned over to San Francisco law enforcement officials because of an outstanding warrant there for a marijuana-related charge that was immediately dismissed. Now, it's interesting that it doesn't say what the marijuana-related charge was, whether it was smoking, dealing, growing. And it's interesting that they had a warrant for his arrest. Well, why issue a warrant if you're not going to pursue it? But they brought the guy there and they dismissed the charge. Local authorities released him despite a request from the federal immigration officials to keep him in custody because of his undocumented status, according to a wrongful death lawsuit. In other words, the lawsuit filed by Steinle's family describes this. So this guy, Lopez Sanchez, stole a .40 caliber pistol from an unlocked car. In fact, the unlocked car belonged to the government, and it was being driven by a U.S. Bureau of Land Management ranger. He stole the ranger's .40 caliber pistol, and then he shot Steinle at Pier 14 along the Embarcadero. Now, this guy had been deported numerous times, 5 or 6 times, right? And so this bill Kate's law is one of 2 bills. In other words, they're going to have an automatic, if you come back in the country, you're going to get a 5-year prison sentence and you get picked up if you were a previous felon. So this Kate's law is one of 2 immigration bills voted on Thursday. The other is No Sanctuary for Criminals Act, which would bar federal grants from sanctuary cities. In other words, it's going to stop federal grants from going to sanctuary cities like San Francisco and allow victims of crimes by undocumented immigrants to sue the cities. So in other words, it's going to stop money, and it'll allow people like Kate Steinle, the Steinle family, to sue the city of San Francisco. Now, as you can imagine, even though this bill also passed, all the Democrats pretty much voted against it. There was a handful that didn't. So I always relate to this because, I deal with death every day with the trauma intervention program. And we do over 40 calls a month, 65% involved in death. I work with people whose loved ones have died from any manner of causes. And it's always interesting. You read something in the paper, you don't know the people, but when you get to know who they are, it has an impact, more of an impact on your life. And so a lot of you may think, oh, yeah, well, it's good. They ought to pass a law, do this. Maybe not, maybe we should, maybe not. But I want to just make a couple comments here about the local connection on another murder that happened just 5 months before Kate Steinle's in the same city in the Mission District on December 7, 2014. Kate was murdered on July 1, 2015. But there's another young man. Kate was 32. This fellow, Casey Bissell, was 25. He was in the city to go to a favorite restaurant in the Mission District, and he and his brother and a couple friends were there having dinner, celebrating because he'd been accepted to finish up his college career or efforts at the UC Berkeley. He'd done a couple of years of junior college to gain access and get his preliminary studies out of the way. And so he was there and came out of this lounge restaurant at the end of the evening, about 2 o'clock, and 2 illegal immigrants stabbed and killed Casey Bissell. Now, the reason I bring it up is he didn't live here, but his parents, I believe, lived up in the Rockland or somewhere up in that area, but he has a grandmother that lives in town here, and actually she wrote an article and submitted it to the Territorial Dispatch, which is a local paper here in Yuba, Sutter County, and they distribute in Butte County, but she wrote an article about it. Now, it's interesting, if you go on to a website called theremembranceproject.org, you might get more personally involved in this cause, theremembranceproject.org, and just click on gallery, and you'll see 100 or so photos of young and old, people that were raped, trashed, run over, killed by cars, stabbing, gunshot, people, innocent people in the United States of America, citizens, killed by illegal immigrants. And that should bring it on home to you. But today, I just want to say that Casey Bissell, we're just going to dedicate the show to Casey, who gave his life trying to protect his brother and some friends on December 7, 2014. We'll be right back.
These cuts are blood money. People will die. Let's be very clear. Senate Republicans are paying for tax cuts for the wealthy with American lives.
People need kidneys, it's sad but decreed, yet the senator's hoarding one more than she needs. I offer this bill and I hope you'll vote aye, unless of course you just want people to die. Traffic deaths have many crying with fear. Over 30,000 people are dying each year. This modest change I propose must be applied, unless of course you just want people to die. Alcohol deaths are exceeding comparisons. Black people, white people, Native Americans. We need to ban alcohol. It can't be denied, unless of course you just want people to die. Murders are bad. They have no defenders, yet many are committed by repeat offenders. I say lifetime in prison, whatever the crime, unless of course you just want people to die. I don't have a bill or a groan to detail. I just need a short clip for my donor email. Tim, there's blood on your hands. You want people to die. That good? Cool. Tim, dinner at 5? Yeah. The car deaths I mentioned are terrible stuff. Doesn't seem one seatbelt is ever enough. You must vote for my act so that fewer will cry, unless of course you just want people to die. The carbs, the container, we cannot ignore. Whipped cream's killing more people than ever before. This bill would be passed and be ratified if those people that didn't want people to die. Why not weigh all the costs, the effects, the results, empathize with each other as if we were adults, use our brains to craft arguments, not vilify, see that freedom's a trade-off. You want people to die! I tried. Crossing the street is incredibly tough. People look left and right, but rarely look up. My bill would mandate.
I'm Ami Horowitz, and I'm here in Berkeley, California to find out if voter ID laws suppress the black vote. have an opinion on voter ID laws?
Yeah, they're usually pretty racist and they're bad.
I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data.
For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed.
I also think there's a repression of black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the African Americans.
Now I'm here in East Harlem to ask black people their thoughts on what you just heard. Do you have ID normally? You carry ID around?
Yes, I have state ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so we know what we need to carry around.
Yeah, everybody that I know have ID. That's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of trick candy cameras?
I know, right? That's the only thing I brought with me.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that. It's on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Would you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
I know these sound like silly questions. You know how to get to the DMV?
Of course.
You know where it is?
Yes.
You can get there?
Uh-huh.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that black people, especially poor black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity, honestly. Everybody has access to the internet. Even a little kid can figure out how to work the internet.
I had access to the internet for years.
You know how to use it properly, right?
Exactly. I do it at work. So, of course, I know how to use it. My kids know how to use it. They all have iPads, iPods, whatever.
Your phone has data?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually
unlimited.
Unlimited data.
Mm-hmm. I use my phone as a hotspot.
What does that say to you for the people who have this perception of black people?
They're pretty much ignorant. That's what my thought process was.
I just think that's ignorant. Ignorant.
Ignorant. That's the word I'm hearing a lot.
Ignorant.
Ignorant.
Very, very ignorant.
Does it sound racist for somebody to say that?
I think it is a little racist because, you're putting people in a category and you have no idea what you're talking about.
Maybe a little bit of racist in it, but like I said, I think it's more stupidity and ignorance.
You're judging somebody, you're judging them because they black, saying that they don't got it.
What people are they talking to? Who are these people talking to?
Do you have a problem that if you go to vote and they say, "Can we please see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are"? Are you
love showing my ID.
You got no problem with that?
Nope.
Would you have a problem if when you go to vote, if they say, "Can we please just see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are"? Do you have an issue with that?
No.
Would you have a problem if there was a rule where you had to show your ID in order to vote?
I don't think so. No.
Would you have an issue if there was a rule saying you got to show your ID before you vote?
Nah.
You cool with that?
Yeah.
All right. You're listening to Lou Benninger. This is Live with Lou, and this is the Patriot, 1410 AM in East Yuba County. We're blasting wherever you want to listen. If you want to listen to Outer Slumbodia, just tune in to that, KNYCradio.com. We're talking about how our government and our government, along with, including law enforcement, is not protecting the people. And one way they aren't. It's fascinating. When I think of the Founding Fathers, they didn't think highly of government. They thought it was kind of a necessary evil. But they felt like we needed a little bit. And the little bit should be focused on protecting people's lives. The concept of protect and serve. So they wanted to invest some money as a nation in protecting invaders that would want to attack the United States of America. And then they felt, because of the sinful tendency of human beings, that somehow we can't play well with others, or we can't keep our hands to ourselves, or sometimes we think some other people's property looks good, so we take it instead of going and getting our own property. They felt we needed local law enforcement to help sort out people that were not staying in their lane in life, right? But recently, there's been some strange brew happening in the United States. And that strange brew is that anybody is welcome here. They don't have to qualify. They don't have to go through any system. They don't have to go through any checks and balances to see whether they're full of disease, full of criminal behavior, or anything else. They can just walk in here and do whatever they want and get away with it. And then stay in a city they call a sanctuary city and not be held responsible. So it's a fascinating thing. So if you look at immigration and you look way back to the, say, late 1800s, 1900s, if you could make it to Ellis Island, New York, people coming primarily to Europe at that time, from Europe, they would check them over, fill out paperwork, and then let them enter the United States. The one huge difference from today is there was zero welfare system to provide any kind of benefits. You got zero benefits other than the fact of opportunity to come to the country and start a new life, maybe have freedom, be set free from persecution in the country you came from. For whatever reason you came, whether you were dying or starving in another country, you could come here and start out. But you had to have people that would sponsor you, and there was no government benefits, no entitlements, zero. You had to fend for yourself. So it wasn't unusual for some people to be here a while and decide to leave and go back home because they just couldn't cut it. But most people did quite well, and they made a life for themselves and future generations. The difference today is that your politicians and my politicians now are funding people that are illegal here, and actually fund people that aren't even citizens. That, like, you can be here legally and not be a citizen, and then you can be here illegally. But all people now are able to tap into a variety of entitlement programs in the United States. So people that are citizens here, whether they were born here or whether they achieved citizenship by immigration, now not only are paying for their through taxes to maintain the country, but now they have to maintain anybody that can cross that border. So it's interesting, this fight now over sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. Basically, the state of California has become the socialist state of California, and those that don't agree with it, that own property here or have businesses here or ended up stuck here, residing here, are stuck with, basically, there's been a takeover. It hasn't been a military takeover, but it's been a takeover that has taken a few decades. But nonetheless, we are being ruled by nutcases, perverts, nutcases, liars, and socialists that just want to take this state in an entirely different direction from the entire United States. So we just saw this Kate's Law passed. It isn't over because it still has to go through the Senate, but only 24 Democrats in the House of Representatives, I think has over 400 members. Only 24 Democrats backed Kate's Law. Now, Kate's Law is very specific, as I said in the last half hour. It's going after, it's saying to people, when we deport you because you're a criminal, if you come back and we pick you up, that's an automatic 5 years in prison. Now, that's a deterrent to me. I go to Vietnam and China all the time, Laos sometimes, Cambodia sometimes, and when I go there, I fill out the proper forms, get my visa, and I obey the laws over there. And when it's time to leave, I leave. And sometimes even when there's been problems in my visa, I always lose. When they made a mistake on my visa at the Washington, D.C. Vietnam Embassy, and then they gave me a letter to explain the mistake so the folks in Vietnam would understand. When I got there, they said, hey, we don't care about no stinking letter. We don't care whether that's got Vietnamese stationery, and anybody can do that nowadays. So either you get on the plane, go back to Hong Kong where you came from, or you pay us another $180, $90 because you did a boo-boo, right? And I didn't do anything wrong. But if I wanted to enter that country, I either needed to pay up or shut up and get out of the country. Now, there ain't no whining over in Vietnam like there is here. Oh, my God, this is so totally way over the top, awesome, unfair. No, you just have to fess up and get out of there or pay the money. So anyway, only 24 Democrats could actually, in good conscience, empower law enforcement and the judicial system of this country to deal with previous felons that were deported after they served their time when they snuck back into this country. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? The only one one of these Democrats, which I was shocked to vote for, was a lady named Jackie Speier, who is quite left-wing. She's a left-wing Democrat. She's way out there. Why she did it, I don't know. But I thought that was interesting. And then when they passed the No Sanctuary for Criminals Act, which is going to go after these cities, a lot of cities, hundreds of cities now throughout the United States are saying, hey, if we have a person in custody and we think they ought to be let go, we're not going to call. And they're not a citizen and they're here illegally. We're not going to call. We're not going to feel obligated to call the feds to come and pick them up. Or if they ask us to put a hold on that person like they did Kate Steinle's murder before he killed her, because he was already in trouble multiple times before. This only 3 Democrats out of the entire over 400 congressional representatives, only 3 Democrats would vote for a No Sanctuary for Criminals Act. Queller, Peterson, and Cartwright. So this sanctuary bill allows for the federal government to withdraw several categories of funds from jurisdictions which hinder the enforcement of immigration law. Just unbelievable. San Francisco is a funky city. Now, I mentioned in the last half hour that not only, I mean, Kate Steinle has become kind of the poster child for murders by illegal aliens. But as I mentioned, we have an actual person with local connections that was murdered prior to Kate. And his name is Casey Bissell, who was a good kid, who was college bound. He finished his first 4 years of college, was headed to UC Berkeley to hopefully go into work for the State Department, International Relations, and was stabbed to death outside of a restaurant by a couple illegal aliens. The one guy got 20 to life. Now, this is an amazing thing. One guy got 20 years to life, the actual guy that did the stabbing, but the other fellow held him down while the guy stabbed him, and he got let out on time served. How would you like that? You'd like hit the lottery on that one. So he had spent, by the time the trial ended, this second gentleman he had spent 220 days in jail, right? A little more than 6 months. And the jury, I don't know whether they were all, had syphilis. I had a presentation at Yuba County Jail the other day on health, and they said there's a big comeback with syphilis. Well, syphilis, I wonder whether a lot of politicians may have dipped into that syphilis because it affects the brain. And the jury couldn't come to terms on what they needed to charge this guy with, like something like accomplice to murder, right? And so the judge just finally threw up his hands and let the guy out with 220 days. In fact, I looked a guy's name up on one of these, not Facebook, but it's another, what do they call that? Interactive media we have now. And I ran into the guy's name down in Guadalajara, and I'm wondering if I didn't find the guy down in Guadalajara now, because it said he used to live in the United States, and his age was exactly right for this fellow. I thought, you dirty dog, come up here and help kill a young man, and now just live free as a bird down in Mexico. So isn't it interesting? We'll see how this thing is going to end up shaken down. Of course, California, if you're a law-abiding citizen who likes the values of the state of California, or likes the values of the United States of America, the state of California is going to be a hard pill to swallow in the years to come unless there's a rebellion and we throw some of these people out of office and get enough people out of office and get a new governor so we can change things around. But I don't know whether it's going to happen in my lifetime, but you never know. You know something? Who knew that Donald Trump was going to be elected? And oh man, I don't have a television hooked up, but I'm telling you, when I stumble across a television and watch some of these news shows, I mean, if you know how you read the New Testament, you ever read the New Testament and they use this term, there was gnashing of teeth. People were so mad they were gnashing their teeth. That's an old King James version. There was, I forget the first term, but there was gnashing of teeth. I think that's what's going on with the media here. They just hate this guy. And but just for I appreciated, even though when I read Brad Steinle, Kate Steinle's brother, was so infuriated at Don Trump, I thought, well, maybe he's like maybe having a change of heart nowadays about Mr. Trump. Well, I wanted to mention to you, you know, here we are in California, and we have the highest gas taxes in the United States, and yet they don't use the gas taxes to fix our roads and add new roads and add new lanes to freeways, but they spend it for social programs that we don't want. And so there's a movement brewing to change that gas tax that just got passed. That new gas tax is adding 12 cents a gallon and adding new DMV fees and all kinds of costs. It's going to cost a lot of people, a lot of families will pay $1,000 or more a year extra. So if you go to Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, you can join a recall and you can sign a petition to rescind this gas tax. So if you go to HJTA, that's Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, hjta.org, and then when you get on that home page, if you click on Stop the Car Tax, and it also has right with it, Recall Josh Newman, you can get involved. Now, you can't sign a petition to recall Josh Newman because you don't live down there if you're listening to me in Northern California, because he's down there in the Orange County. He's down there in Southern California. So the people of that area who voted him in just recently, this is his first term, and they voted against a more conservative Asian person. It was a very close race, but Josh got elected, and the first thing he did as a Republican is he voted for this gas tax. So people want to recall him down there. So you know what, this government of California is so corrupt. The citizens down there began a recall petition, and so the Democrats, who have a supermajority in both houses of the legislature in California, they thought, well, we're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let the will of the people prevail. We're going to make it very difficult to recall Josh Newman. So they put a trailer on a bill that said that people can rescind their signature. In other words, they can sign. If they signed, then we're going to give them so many days they can rescind that signature, withdraw it. So now they're going to phone every person that signed that petition and try to convince them to not stay on that petition to recall Josh Newman. The reason is that if they recall Josh Newman, it's going to put their supermajority in jeopardy and make it more difficult to do whatever they want to do. Whatever's right in their own eyes, as the book of Judges would say, which is pretty perverted. So they have turned in 85,000 signatures so far, which is more than they need. However, you never know. There may be some bad signatures there. So please don't go sign if you're not from Josh Newman's district. However, since this car tax is going to cost all of us some money, what about donating towards the Fire Josh Newman cause? So you can go to Stop the Car Tax. You can go hjta.org, or you can go to Fire, F-I-R-E, Fire Josh Newman, N-E-W, New Man, right? N-E-W-M-A-N, firejoshnewman.com, and say, hey, just figure like this gas tax is going to go for, I think, 10 years. And I want you to just think about if your DMV bill is going to go up $100, $200, and you pay another 12 cents a gallon per gas forever, amen. And or you diesel truckers out there, it might be worth all of us chipping in $20, $30, $40, $50, $100 and see if we can't kick these guys' rear and overturn this and turn this thing around. The fact is there's plenty of money. California has plenty of money. It's just misspending it. You know, I used to do a budget counseling. I hated it at Glad Tidings, Church of Glad Tidings. I just hated it because the problem wasn't ever money. It was always people. It's people's brains that are screwed up. And so you talk to people, and they wouldn't want to concede anything. You talk to them about their budget. They were like owed $30,000 in credit cards, got this, got that. They were making pretty good money. They had money coming in. They just were spending way above their means, right? It's like a person at a buffet. Instead of just eating a plate of food, they think, I got to eat 3 plates and 3 desserts. And then they wonder why they got to get Expandomatic pants or some of them yoga pants. Makes your butt look like a meteorite hooked on the back of you. So anyway, why don't you get involved? Listen, you know, nothing's going to change, Californians, if you decide to hang around California. If you do nothing, nothing's going to change. It's just going to get funkier and funkier, and they're going to get right up into your grill and be charging you all kinds of money and sending transsexuals into your school to talk to your kids about transsexuality. And it's just bad, bad, bad. So why don't you like fight for a change and join up with the state of Jefferson and like get involved and spend some money? You know, it's fascinating to me how cheap people are that make pretty good money, but they'll give money to the government. They'll pay their taxes. They'll pay all these extra fees and get ripped off. And they'll think, well, I don't know if given to a nonprofit or a recall campaign. Well, I don't know exactly how the money's being spent. Well, you don't do jack diddly when the money's wasted. You don't do jack diddly about your taxes when the money's just wasted or given to stupid stuff like studying the sexual habits of chimpanzees that do cocaine. You know, come on, man. So get a clue. Now, there's another issue going before the state of California. This should really get your attention. Most of you don't remember Prop 13 that was passed in the 1970s. The property taxes in the state of California were getting so high that people my age that had worked all their life and had a house, or maybe were even still paying on a house, the property taxes were so high that once people retired, they couldn't afford to pay their property taxes. And people were losing their property because they couldn't pay their property taxes. So there was a movement, and California was the first state in the union to pass a bill to put the kibosh on these radically increasing property taxes. So now we have what they call a storm water property tax that they want to assess on top of your property taxes. It's called SB Senate Bill 231. And I'm going to explain about it for a little bit here, and then we're going to jump it, and I'll talk about it on the back side of this break. But listen, there's been a lot of pressure on assembly members to defeat this already, and they keep putting it off, taking a vote on it because so many people are calling, complaining about it. But what this is going to do is add hundreds and hundreds of dollars to your property tax to pay for stormwater management. In other words, it's just another trough of money to say, well, no, your taxes don't cover the stormwater costs. We're going to add this stormwater. It's not a tax. It's just a fee, and we're going to add that to your property tax. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. You're listening to Live with Lou. We're into the second hour, 10 to 11. And we've been talking about this Rob Hertzberg bill, 251, I think it is, SB 251, and they want to tax stormwater. And so it's interesting. The government is got into this thing like they tax us, and then they add another tax, and you say, why? And they think, well, all those other taxes, they didn't cover this. So now we have one thing after another, like, well, that tax didn't really cover the roads. Even though we taxed your gasoline, it didn't really cover the roads. And you pay property taxes, and you pay all the other taxes. Well, that didn't really cover the sewage. And the sewage didn't cover the sewage. It covered part of the sewage, but not the stormwater. So now we have to have, now they want to slice and dice every service they offer and charge you for it on top of charging you taxes. So the estimate is that stormwater regulations will cost cities in Los Angeles County an estimated $20 billion. An assessment on top of their property taxes per parcel, annual charge of $1,200. So, and this is to manage stormwater. So, you remember last year, Yuba County, I don't remember Sutter County, what they did. I think maybe they did the same, but it was really some publicity about Yuba County stopping any car washing. Like, you could wash your own car with a hose in front of your house, but if you wanted to wash 50 cars and raise money to bury a baby or to send the cheerleaders to some competition in another part of the state or another state, then that's illegal, because they didn't want that water running down into the storm drain, because even though we've survived that for hundreds and hundreds of years, we can't survive it now. So now, I was thrilled the other day when I was out in Olivehurst, going down Olivehurst Ave near Olivehurst and 7th, and there was a bunch of people with placards and a picture of a little kid on there, and they were washing cars to bury the kid. I thought, thank you, Jesus. Screw the government of Yuba County. I'm sick of this stuff. And I wish there was a car wash on every single corner. I'm so sick of the government managing and having an opinion about every little thing anybody does. So, okay. So Leon, as being a good friend and a competent board operator, he's reminding me that I need to play a clip. So I want to play this clip before we break into another topic, which is going to be pensions. So if you want to talk about pensions and going broke in your county and not having more taxes, hang on just for a minute. But I'm going to talk about farm subsidies. Now, the Republicans, who really aren't conservative, including like people Doug LaMalfa, James Gallagher, and Jim Nielsen, that's the local cabal. These guys are faux Republicans, faux conservatives. They're posers. And people get all stirred up. Oh, I like James. He's such a nice guy. I don't give a crap whether he was Al Capone. If Al Capone was running things and he was conservative, I'd vote for him. I'm looking for some people that are conservative and shrink this government and stop this craziness, this moral craziness in our country. It's interesting that Republicans will say, oh, we hate welfare. We're going to take away the food stamps. We're going to take away welfare. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, which I'm not against. But then they turn around and get millions of dollars in farm subsidies from the government. I thought, well, why don't we give a subsidy for the liquor store down the street that's struggling? Why don't we give us, for the muffler shop, for the tire shop? Why don't they get subsidies? So let's listen to this clip on farm subsidies.
Every year, politicians warn if we want to guarantee America's food supply, we have to save the family farm. And to do that, they want your money.
Lawmakers in Washington have passed a new farm bill.
In 2008, Congress passed another $300 billion farm bill.
We cannot turn back, not with an economy to fix and farms to save.
Saving farms is what politicians promise that farm supports will do.
Now, how old is this cat?
It's a reason they do photo ops like this one. The president wouldn't talk to us about the farm bill. We contacted 69 members of Congress who voted for it, but couldn't get any of them to talk to us until finally Randy Kuhl of New York and Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas agreed to speak.
Family farms, small farms are important.
And I don't think we want anybody in this country to starve.
People would starve?
They go out of business, then they'd be forced to move elsewhere and find different jobs.
Well, that's not starving, that's finding a different job.
But if they don't have a job, then they're going to starve.
Well, they're doing pretty well in Nebraska. Corn farmer Mike Korth gets subsidies. He'll take the money, he says, but he's against the farm bill.
It's a bad bill. In the end, if you take a bunch of money, it's like they grab the treasure chest, they open the door on it, and whoever can get the most out of it, you just run away with it.
Nebraska farmers are running away with a lot of your money. Home prices may have been falling in most of America, but farmland prices have been rising. Here they've shot up 77% in 4 years. Farm subsidies rarely go to poor people. The average farmer makes twice what the average American earns. Yet Nebraska politicians want more.
We need to get farmers a better safety net here.
If you're a politician from Nebraska and you want to get elected, Republican or Democrat, the way to do that is to say, I support farm subsidies.
Yes, that's a very important thing to our farmer is subsidies.
It would lose dramatic population if the subsidies weren't there at all.
But despite the billions spent on subsidies, farm towns are smaller than ever. In Mike Korth's town, store after store is boarded up.
It's pretty sad. The school at one time had just short of 1,000 kids in it, and now we don't have 300.
It hasn't kept these small towns alive.
Well, I think it has. I'm from a small town of 72 people. I am, and I'm going to tell you, farm subsidies have helped that town.
After this interview, we researched his town. It was twice as big during the Depression. Population has dropped steadily ever since. But this isn't working.
Well, I think it is.
And more. You guys are on welfare.
It's
not working.
Actually, I disagree with that because I think it is working.
Actually, a government study found that the more farm aid a county got, the more likely it was to lose population. Why would that be? Because subsidies make it harder for smaller farmers to compete. Economist Walter Williams.
The farm subsidies go to very, very wealthy farmers, not the ma and pa farm. It's these huge agribusinesses that get the big subsidies.
Farmers like Maurice Wilder. He's been America's single biggest recipient of farm subsidies. He wouldn't let us take a picture of his jet, but here he is at one of his many homes. Wilder's estimated to be worth $500 million. But he still gets your help making ends meet.
Where is a limit where you say, you know what, you're big enough now, you can put your pants on by yourself?
How do rich farmers legally get subsidies? The Farm Bill does say no payments to farmers who make more than $1.25 million a year.
Yeah, and I can guarantee you, any one of them guys, they've got accountants that can hide that income.
When you have a farm bill this size, this stretches almost 2 football fields. There are loopholes in here somewhere for a wealthy farmer to crawl through.
I don't blame anybody from taking it when it's there and available.
You're getting a handout.
Well, they're getting, in a sense, it is a handout.
This is not a handout, take it, and if you lose it, fine, walk away. Not at all.
It's not?
No, it's not.
Why isn't that a handout?
I don't term it a handout, I term it an investment.
But that's your money he's investing. And why? We don't need farm subsidies to have an ample food supply. I bet you didn't know that the growers of most crops don't get subsidies. Growers of apples, bananas, broccoli, cabbage, cantaloupe, carrots, cauliflower, grapes, lemons, limes, lettuce, and dozens of other crops get no subsidies. There's no cabbage crisis or pineapple panic. And yet, because big crops get subsidies like rice and corn, food costs more.
I'm not used to paying these prices.
Another reason prices are high is that farmers get paid for not farming.
You get a government payment on it, about $26,000.
More than $20,000 a year for not farming his land. Real estate agents even use farm payments to sell homes to non-farmers. Agents didn't want to say that on television, so our producer posed as a home buyer and brought along a video camera.
Do you have to farm it? Do you have to farm it to receive it? No. It's like a little bonus that you don't really have to do anything to get.
All these homes get government payments, though nothing's farmed here. The owner of this home collected $7,000.
Well, it's like offered to us.
She isn't exactly sure why.
I think it's a weird setup, but there's a lot of weird setups.
This is just a crazy system. It's left over from the 1930s, left over from the Depression, and it's a great example of how nothing is as permanent as a temporary government program.
Of course, it is true that without subsidies, some bureaucrats would be out of work, and some farms would go out of business. But that's okay, say economists. It's part of the creative destruction that makes America strong.
When there's progress, certain jobs are destroyed and certain jobs are created. The guy who delivered ice to my house, he doesn't have the job because we have refrigerators. We're better off. Now, the guy who lost his job selling ice, he probably got some other job, but we would have been held back if we had tried to save his job.
But today in America, politicians are eager to spend your money to keep certain auto companies afloat.
Loan guarantees that we've already passed for our auto industry.
Certain banks in business.
We must pass legislation to address this crisis.
And to keep farms from closing.
I think we might have to get 2 or 3 of these, don't you think?
Yeah. There is one country that has abolished farm subsidies, New Zealand. There were riots and protests when they did that. Farmers said, we'll go bankrupt. People said, we'll starve. But it didn't happen. In fact, farm productivity quintupled.
Agriculture there has boomed once they got people off the dole. Instead of sucking up to you politicians, they found ways to be more efficient as farmers.
I don't have many farmers sucking up. I do have them coming in and thanking me for allowing their family farm to survive.
Clothing and shelter are important too. Why don't we subsidize them? If this works so well, why don't we just subsidize everything?
Well, I would say to you that you don't.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that on subsidies. You know, one of the problems we have, I was talking to someone on the phone yesterday, and we're discussing the difficulty in getting any reform done anywhere. And the problem is that everybody has their hand in the till, and so it doesn't pay for them to change what's going on. So you think, oh, well, if I do that, then they're not going to vote for me. Or if I do that, then my friend is going to lose some money. And if I do that, this and that. And the other thing, it's like, it's just easier to let the whole thing go over the cliff. And then it's nobody's fault. Nobody takes responsibility. And then everybody just has to pick up the pieces, right? And you know who pays for that? That would be you and me, the taxpayer, who didn't have anything to do with the bad decision-making that got us where we are today. Now, I wrote an article. Now, let me just say this first. This caught my eye because I have a daughter that lives down in this county, and she is a part of the problem. She works for the school system down there, and she's a government employee. And she is married to an Orange County sheriff deputy, and he works for the government, and he's a part of the problem. Did they join their prospective occupations to be a part of the problem? No, they had a calling to do what they wanted. She wanted to help children that were troubled, and he wanted to help keep the peace and serve the community. Those are both good motives, and that's a good calling to go into. I'm proud of both of them. However, they joined a system that is corrupt and bankrupt. They didn't create it, but they're a part of it, and probably they will help promote it by being a part of it. Now, the title that got my attention of an article said Orange County fire captain rakes in over $500,000 thanks to soaring overtime pay. I want you to think about that. You like firemen, firewomen? Do you like police officers? Most everybody I know do. They like them both, and they think they're really valuable people. And most of them I've ever known are pretty cool people. They're good people. The question is, how much are they worth? And of course, when you start talking to people about their job, everybody thinks they're worth every penny they get plus more, and as much more as they can get. And that's what I'm talking about is everybody has their hand in the till. So being around the fire business for years as chaplain for Yuba City Fire, I got to hear a lot of talks about guys just sitting there at the table having dinner with them or something, and all talking about retirement. I just got tired of talking about it because in my group that I hang out with outside of public employees, no one talks about retirement. Everybody talks about what they're doing with their life, their work, their mission in life. But when you get into the public employees, they seem to be talking about when I'm going to retire. I got 4,563 more days till I retire, right? And the retirement system is so screwed up and corrupt that it encouraged people to do crazy things. Like it encouraged people to, when a guy's going to retire in 300 days, they would promote him to a higher rank so he could get a higher pay, so he could retire at a higher amount per month for the rest of his life, based upon the pay that he just got temporarily. They really didn't want to promote him there forever. They just wanted to give him a boost in pay. And there was a lot of things that you could get added on to your base pay, like these overtime amounts. That all contributes to the amount of money that you will retire at when you decide to retire after 30, 20, 30 years, whatever, right? So these overtime amounts all figure in. So this gentleman, he got total compensation, including his benefits, for 12 months for being a firefighter. He got $508,495. Now, I don't know how much you think firefighters are worth, but I don't think we can afford to pay that gentleman. He may be just good as gold. He may be able to do CPR and get 100 out of 100 saves, where the average person just gets 1 out of 100. But maybe Mr. Bradshaw was the guy, maybe he could just do that. But the average fire captain in Orange County received $301,791 in pay and benefits last year, according to TransparentCalifornia.com. Now, if you go to TransparentCalifornia.com, you can look up your city, your county, if they have reported to this site. Now, Yuba City, I noticed they didn't report their 2016 salary data. So when I was looking at it, I could only go off 2015. But if you look at the Yuba City firefighters, they're not far behind these Orange County boys. Now, they're way ahead of their compadres over at the Yuba City Police Department. Now, go take a look at it. I'm not going to spend time going over one after another. A lot of these folks are my friends, and I didn't lose my friendship with them because they make all this money. My feeling is, hey, I've never really been into money myself. I just don't have it in me. It's like, hey, I'll eat a few times a day, have a place to sleep, have a car. The rest of it's just foolishness to me. But other people really like to have piles and piles and piles of money. It's okay with me. The thing is, my problem is if I got to somehow pay for it when they're public employees. Now, if a guy's running a car dealership and he's a really sharp guy and he gives you a really good deal and he makes lots and lots and lots and lots of money, say he makes $1 bajillion a year, I don't feel bad for him. I'm happy for him. And but if these public employees, if we got to fund it and it's breaking the entire city and county, then I got a real problem with it, and there needs to be a change. So if you look at the TransparentCalifornia.com, you need to do some of your own research. I can't do it all for you. There's only 3 hours a week I get to talk, and I can't have the time to go over all this. So you need to go check out, look up Yuba City, transparentcalifornia.com, because Yuba City, as their finance person, Robin Batania, she says these salaries, benefits, health and pensions are going to gobble up the entire amount that we have to work with from the taxpayers. Now, I was sent an article from the Butte County area where Butte County is laying off 79 employees. Now, that's a big many employees. And in the recent articles in the paper, Robert Bendorf, who is county administrator of Yuba County, suggested to the supervisors adding a 1% sales tax to everything purchased in the county. In other words, instead of 7.5% out in the county, it'd be 8.5%. Now, I don't know whether that would affect the city of Marysville as well, because we just went up to 8.5 because the city passed a ballot measure. And the use of that money supposedly is to backfill the debt that they can't take care of because these politicians, in secret negotiations with the unions, have sold our butts down the river. And these politicians then take their money and their retirement and go on about their way, and usually even move out of the county and leave the taxpayers stuck with the bill. It's kind of like you going to a fancy restaurant and eating to your heart's desire, or ordering the most expensive thing on the menu. And then when the check comes, you point over to another table and say, they got the check over there. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. And leave them a tip and hit the door as fast as you can. That's what these politicians, they're eating and running, as we used to say. So, Transparent California, it's the state's largest and most accurate public pay database, and you can check 411 California cities. Now, what I did is I went and I wrote 2 articles in the Territorial Dispatch last week. If you don't get it, that's fine. You can always subscribe to. You can call them up on the phone. They're located in Marysville, Territorial Dispatch. Just look it up on Google. But you can look up the articles at territorialdispatch.biz, hit current issue, and read both of them on the front page. One about San Diego and correcting the problem, and one about how we got the problem, called the pension poison. So we're going to go to a break right now. Then I'm going to continue talking about pensions. It's going to blow your hair back. So hold on.
Other presidents tried to say nice things about the Russians and other, warm things in their heart and they love, not in the face of an active attack on the country.
Hey, man.
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
Yeah.
The more I see CNN constantly Russia this, Russia that.
There's this ratings.
I would encourage everybody in this room and frankly everybody across the country to take a look at it.
Changing it from fake news, though.
Doesn't that
Very fake news.
I know, but aren't you?
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Today we continue with our American Pravda investigations inside America's mainstream media with part 2 on CNN. Fake news. The Russia story. You're about to see one of CNN's most prominent left-leaning political commentators in total agreement with President Trump. We think this might be the first time this has ever happened. Maybe it's because he didn't realize he was going to be on television. And as Chris Cuomo has said, sometimes that's when you're the most honest.
Hey, man. We met in Palm Springs a few years back.
Good to see you, man. You good?
Yeah. How you been? What are you doing?
Good.
What do you think's going to happen this week? I mean, with the whole Russia thing.
The Russia thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think that?
There's nothing there you can do. The Russia thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think that?
There's nothing there you can do.
Yesterday, you met supervising producer John Bonifield.
The more I see CNN constantly Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Because it's ratings?
Our ratings are incredible right now.
But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just like bullshit.
Could be bullshit. I mean, it's mostly bullshit right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof. But
CNN's response, quote, CNN stands by our medical producer, John Bonifield. Diversity of personal opinion is what makes CNN strong. We welcome it and embrace it, unquote. Good, because Bonifield says he was not alone in his cynicism for the news business, and Van Jones agrees with him that the Russia story is bold.
so I love the news business, but I
find it so fascinating.
I'm very cynical about it. At the same time, so are most of my colleagues.
Yeah, it's like
I'm not alone.
The Russia thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really? The organization is reeling. The president is posting headlines about our investigation, and even mainstream media is paying attention. White House spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders has a recommendation to all.
There's a video circulating now, whether it's accurate or not, I don't know, but I would encourage everybody in this room and frankly, everybody across the country to take a look at it.
So there you have it. Van Jones admits the Russia story is just a nothing burger. Bonifield says it's all about ratings. The White House is telling everyone to go watch the videos. The media for years has gotten away with manufacturing consent. People are fed up with the emptiness and the artifice that pervades our media. Well, I'll tell you something. Change is coming, whether CNN likes it or not.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about pension poison today. I wrote an article about that in the Territorial Dispatch. You know where pensions started for California? Once upon a time, the government was, it's like when when you start to work for somebody and you work there year after year. Like my dad worked basically for himself, did the same thing for 40 some years. Now people change jobs all the time, but in government, they found that when people needed to leave, when they were too old to do their job anymore and they weren't effective, they weren't efficient, they needed to just retire. That people weren't retiring and they couldn't figure out how to get rid of them. And the government, being bloated, didn't want to fire them. Like in business, you have private enterprise, you just say, you just have a talk with somebody and say, this isn't working out anymore, and you could just let them go. But in government, they wouldn't. So they created a pension system. They'd say, listen, you go on home, and we're going to replace you because you're 140 years old, and we'll just pay you to stay at home. And they called that a pension. And so then, about the late 1960s, we gave government employees in California the right to unionize. And so the problem started. Now, you can read this in detail in two articles I wrote. One is Pension Poison in the Territorial Dispatch. And you can research that all you want. You're not going to find any difference than what I said. And then I wrote an article about how San Diego, because they were going broke, one of the most prosperous, beautiful cities in California, the unions had made so many deals, backroom deals with politicians that had all their hand in the till that the government was collapsing. And so they made a change. Now what's happened is between political incest, between politicians who are voted into power by unions, they're given money by unions, large amounts of money by unions, and unions tell their union members to vote for Joe because he's supporting us. So after Joe gets elected, then he turns around, and when it's negotiations time, Joe remembers that he got $100,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 from unions, and he gives them what they want. So up and up and up, the benefits go up and up and up, the pay goes. And pretty soon, the local government that nobody really ever stops to think about or tally up what the local government will have to pay. Now, when the county of Sutter, under Larry Combs, And Jim Whitaker and Larry Munger and the rest of the supervisors at that time, in about 2004, they snuck through a 35% pension increase. They were supposed to present actuarials, in other words, predictions or schematics, financial schematics of what impact that would have and how in the world taxpayers would be able to pay for that in the years to come. But they did not do that, and instead of putting it on as an agenda item, they slipped it through on the consent agenda, even though it was questioned by the auditor controller at the time, Robert Stark, who was doing his job, keeping an eye on the financial wranglings in the county. Consequently, when he did that, they began to attack Stark and try to bully him out of office. But they got their 35% increase that now has accumulated to 150. We're talking Sutter County here, people. One of the poorer counties in the state of California, of the 58 counties. We're talking that the Sutter County owes $150 million, according to current auditor controller Nathan Black. We owe $150 million to the pension fund that we have no set-aside funds to pay for. That means when they say unfunded liability, that means money you owe that you have no means to pay right now. So that story can be told city by city, county by county, agency by agency, and up to the state. The total pension liability for all state, county, and municipal governments, when you add them all up, according to Stanford University's pension tracker, it adds up to $106,848 in debt for every household, not every person, every household in California. Now, even the pension managers at CalPERS, which is California Public Employee Retirement System, there's also CalSTRS for teachers. They got the same exact problem. Even if they generate 7% interest annually without any loss over the next 30 years, which is actually, we could raise the dead before they're going to pull that off. If they did it for 30 years, this debt for every household instead would be $28,507. So if you are in a household, you're probably going to be due $106,000. Now you wonder, how are we going to pay for that? Well, we're not going to pay for it the way we're going. A change has got to happen. You're not going to be able to pay a fire captain $500,000 a year. You're not going to be able to pay a Yuba City fighter $250,000 a year in salary and benefits. Do you like them? Are they nice people? Are they great employees? Probably. Yes. Can you afford? You got to get beyond what is a person worth to what we can afford to pay. So the last few years, CalPERS has been they take the money that all these pensions, all the pension money coming into CalPERS, a retirement fund, that's people that work, they participate, they contribute some, and then the county and the cities, the municipalities, they contribute the most. And all that money goes in to pay for current pensions and future pensions. Right now, there's not enough money coming in to pay for the current pensions. So people's money that they're paying in right now for their future pension is being paid for people that are already retired. That's called there was a guy named Charles Ponzi. Look it up. It's a fascinating story on Wikipedia. Charles Ponzi was put in prison for years of doing the exact same thing that CalPERS is doing, paying current bills. He said, give me your money. Charles Ponzi said, give me your money. I'm going to give you fantastic results, more than you can make anywhere else in the world. And so the first people that paid money in, because other people were paying money in, the first people that got their payouts under Charles Ponzi did make a lot of money. But it was all based upon lots and lots of money coming in from new suckers all the time. New suckers, new suckers, new suckers. And finally the government stepped in and said, this is what they call a Ponzi. The scheme is named after Charles Ponzi. Ponzi scheme, Ponzi. And that's what CalPERS is. So what's happening is that the unions have so much money. For instance, there's hundreds of thousands of teachers. Each of them pay the union $1,000 a year, say, or more. Hundreds of millions of dollars are at the behest of spending of all the union leaders. And so when Gray Davis came into power in 1998, they gave Gray Davis a contribution of $5 million. So when he got into power, and at that time there was the dot-com, all the dot-com companies were booming, and the CalPERS was actually making some pretty good money. And the unions, instead of like being reasonable, they said, there's such a surplus in CalPERS, we want that money, and we want to have higher pensions, and we want to allow our people to retire earlier and get more money because there's a surplus there and we want it. So Gray Davis, because he got $5 million from him, he said, okay, the legislature passed it because the union owned the legislature because they got him into power. That's SB 400 if you want to look it up. It was passed primarily by Democrats, and it was signed by Governor Gray Davis, who was paid $5 million in his election campaign. That increased benefits for all levels of public employees based upon a false assumption. What's that false assumption? That life in the future is going to be good like today or better. That the stock market would continue to achieve record levels, which is ridiculous. They made up to 35% increases in pensions, and it stoked the government's bid for re-election. Basically, Gray Davis was assured he would be re-elected, although he was eventually recalled just a year or so later. But the pension decision stayed intact. So here's what happened. As soon as SB 400 passed, it made more than 200,000 civil servants eligible to retire at an earlier age. You know, when Social Security started, you had to live to your retirement age of 65. Most people never made it that far in America at that time when Social Security started, or they'll live a year or two after. So even though they didn't pay much in, most people didn't get any out. So 200,000 civil service representatives, they were eligible to retire at an earlier age. Think of retiring at 55. And in many cases, they could collect more than half of their highest salary for life. Do you remember I said earlier that highest salary meant a lot of different things? You could add bonuses in there. You could add overtime in there. You could add all kinds of things. You can add a promotion right at the end of your career. You could get a little promotion, and they would bump your salary status up. And so based on your highest salary, you could earn more money, less years. California Highway Patrol officers could begin retiring at 50. So at 3% retirement, in other words, they'd take the number of years in service. So say you were a highway patrolman, you started at 20, and at 50 you retired, and you had 30 years in. They would multiply 30 times 3%. That means 90%. 30 times 3. So you take 90% times their peak pay. Other police departments got this benefit as well. Not all of them, but some. Now, you think, oh, well, whatever. Well, whatever. The problem is you have to pay for it. And that money that CalPERS cannot afford to pay them because they gave them that increase based upon all this surplus they had. But the fact is that in your own life, if you've lived very long, some years you make a lot of money and you don't have too many expenses. And in other years you have lots of expenses and money's a little tight. Life goes up and down like that. And so what happened is the CalPERS program made all these, and the legislature passed it. They made all these promises to all these hundreds of thousands of dollars of employees of the state of California. And then they had to come up with the money to pay for it. But now they're dipping into current retirement contributions from fresh workers at the local level to pay for commitments of people that retired years ago. Pension spiking was the rage. There are all these loopholes that people figured out, hey, if I can get a promotion and they make me a captain for a 6-month period and I could retire out at captain's wages versus an engineer on the fire department, right? So the whole idea was they sold it because the pitch was from the unions and the legislature was this was not going to cost taxpayers a nickel. In 1999, that's the way they sold it. It wasn't going to cost taxpayers another nickel. We got this. We got all these reserves. We're investing all these money, et cetera, et cetera. So right after it passed, within a year after it passed, the dot-com bubble popped. And 8 years after that, the housing market crashed. All this combined with lousy investment decisions and actual corruption collapsed CalPERS. Now, last year they made 0.6%. Not 1%, not 2%, not 7%. Just a little over 0.5% is all that CalPERS made. And so you know what? When that happens, they have an agreement with all these agencies that the agencies got to take money out of their general fund. That's city council, county, state agencies, other agencies that are connected to CalPERS got to pay more money in. In other words, they just got to they'll say, hey, we need 15% more, 20% more, not based upon more retirees. It's just like, hey, we can't pay our current retirees. So your current employees are going to maybe have to pay more in, but you're going to have to take money out of your general fund. Now, let me tell you the corruption that's involved here, besides being totally incestuous. There was a guy named Alfred Villalobos, Villalobos. Alfred Villalobos got tight with CalPERS officials, and he was an investment manager, and he convinced CalPERS officials to let him handle their investments and let him broker their investments. Now, we're talking about billions of dollars to invest that are sitting in accounts to pay every month huge amounts of money to retirees, hundreds of thousands of retirees out there, right? So Villalobos earned about I want you to just think about this a minute, $50 million in commissions by letting him broker. In other words, he cornered the market on CalPERS investments. And it's thought that he made $50 million in commissions. Villalobos pled guilty to bribing CalPERS officials. In other words, it just wasn't like he was performing at a high level and making a lot of money for CalPERS. He paid them off. He pled guilty to paying off CalPERS officials to make all their investments through him, and it generated $50 million in commissions for Alfred Villalobos. Former CalPERS executive CEO Fred Buenrostro, in the Villalobos case, also pled guilty to criminal charges for accepting bribes. This is a major state agency in charge of caretaking. You know, it's amazing to me, whenever you start saying, we want to use 401ks or let state people invest their own money, immediately all these union officials they start screaming corruption, and they're going to rip people off, and they're not going to manage the money well, and what if things don't work out? Look at what's happening to CalPERS. I want you to think about, see if you can name any state government department that you think, oh man, they perform at such a high level. I love that State Department. Just think about them. DMV, just go down the list. ABC, the alphabet list, ABC, DMV, right? EPA. They're all screwy. They're totally screwy. The fact that this criminal activity could take place in a major state agency is amazing. It put at risk the security of thousands and thousands of government workers who depend on those funds that they trusted their money and state, county, and city money to. This bribery thing didn't just happen in a couple months. This went on for a number of years and never was discovered. Why wasn't it discovered? What about all these audits? What else don't we know about CalPERS? There was a $20 million settlement. Do we even know how much was lost? I think Villalobos eventually took his own life. It's kind of amazing, isn't it, when you think about it? Pretty sad. I want to go over some costs, because here's what's happening. You may think this isn't really my thing. It's kind of boring. I shouldn't have to be bothered by it. Listen, you need to be bothered by it. You need to wake up out there. You need to get a clue, because just getting up every morning and taking a stupid pill ain't working out for us around here. And our forefathers actually put their hands on the wheel and drove this country and stood up and fought for things that were going to cause this country to survive, instead of just laying over and say, well, if you want to do that, you can do that, and be passive. So we got screwed by the city of Marysville raising 1% tax and lying to the voters. And now they're spending the money willy-nilly, and they just put us another $1 million in debt after going out and convincing everybody to let them raise taxes in Marysville. Now, Robert Bendorf is talking the same way about raising taxes. And where's that going to end? Because the pension costs are going up every year. Now, I wrote an article in the Territorial Dispatch. You can look at it at territorialdispatch.biz, B-I-Z, and you can look at how San Diego dealt with it. Now, I get a kick out of all the politicians who tell me, well, there's nothing. Well, it's like, amazing to me. Politicians people call me and say, will you vote for me? We need to change this, and we need to change it. By God, we need to change this, and we need to do this, and we need to do that. Then they get in there and you say, hey, we need to change this. Well, I don't think we can do that. Well, I don't think we can do that. Well, I don't think we can do that. Well, I just don't think we can do that. Well, I don't think that's legal. Well, why don't you guys all just resign, and we'll just do this without you if you don't think we can do anything? And I have to tell people, I said, well, the city of San Diego, can we use them as an example? I tried to tell the city of Marysville, well, I don't think we should get rid of our police department. We need to spend $1 million a mile. I said, well, why don't you check with some major cities in Orange County or San Diego that get by fine without a police department, and use that money for parks and recreation stuff. Oh, well, I was just too busy. I don't know. Well, I don't know. Well, he's a nice guy that's the chief. I don't know about that. So now we have Robert Bendorf wants to add another % of tax and to put that on the ballot of Yuba County. And let me tell you how they're going to pitch it. I'll tell you right now, you don't even have to wait till the pitch. There'll be a big advertising campaign. They'll probably get a developer to pitch it, because the government can't use their own money, or you can't use our money against us. And they'll pitch it, and here's what they're going to say. We're not going to be able to run a sheriff's department without another %, because they won't tell you this, because we spent all the other money we should have been spent on the sheriff's department for these pensions and high wages. Like Robert Bendorf, he makes $250,000 a year, but whenever there's a decision to be made, they got to hire a consultant. Hold that thought. Why don't we hire somebody to run these agencies that got enough brains to figure stuff out on their own instead of hire consultants? Same way that Mr. Munchheimer over in the city of Marietta, hire a consultant, pay them $100,000. Oh, pay that person $70,000. Oh, pay that person $50,000. If the guy's so smart, why don't he figure some of this out on his own or go back to Florida where he came from? So I'm going to go over some pension figures. You should get your pencil out because it's serious stuff. So we'll be right back. What do we got? We got an hour left. Yeah, we got an hour left. Come on, man. It's our last hour here from 11 to 12. You're listening to The Patriot, 1410 AM. I don't know whether I mentioned our FM simulcast, 104.3 if you care. You can always go there. All right, is it better? They're having me adjust my speaking here. I'm getting sloppy. Well, we're talking about pensions, and I don't think people look at this. You see employees working for the city and county. You see them in all different places, in offices, out in trucks, in the ditches, in cop cars, fighting fires, keeping this place happening around here. And you may not know how much it's costing you, and the fact is it's costing, when here's where it gets confusing. You confuse worth with what we can afford. Lots of times people say, I want a bigger house. I want a nicer car. I want a new dress. I want to buy that meat over there instead of like rice and beans. The question always is, it's probably worth every penny you're going to pay for it. But can you afford it? And in California, we're having a problem, even though they're the most wealthy state in the union. Because of the way we're managing things, we're not able to afford what we thought we could. And unfortunately, politicians have made decisions that taxpayers never got a chance to say anything about, like how much we pay people, how much we think people should get as a percentage of their pay for their retirement, since they're public employees. And so unions have an inside track with politicians who give them what they want. Unions give them what they want. Both give them each what they want. It's kind of like having sex with your daughter, right? She's convenient. She's in the bedroom next door. Doesn't cost you anything. You're already paying for a room and board. You just get what you want. So let me just give you a perspective. If you look up on transparentcalifornia.org, you can look up pensions, and you can look up on the pension tracker that I mentioned earlier, Stanford University Pension Tracker, and you can look up some of these figures I'm going to give you here. So, let me see here. I looked up almost 21,000 pensions. There's actually, if you look up under CalPERS pensions, you'll find over 625,000 people collecting pensions in the state of California. That means they're no longer working, but we're still paying them. You got it? So that means you have to pay enough taxes to pay for 625,000 plus people that aren't working, plus all the people that are working. So of those 625,000, nearly 21,000 of them are being paid every single month $100,000 or more and not doing a thing for it. As long as they're breathing, that's what they get. So of that 20,000, let's just call it 21,000 for sake of smoothing. It's just 14 people short of 21,000. So let's just say 21,000 are all making $100,000 or up. And of that 21,000, 2,419 are making $150,000 to $200,000. And of that 21,000 that are making 100,000 or more, 334 of them are making from $200,000 to $467,000 for not working, and will continue to get that money for the rest of their life. Now, that's not all they get. You thought, whoa, that's a lot of money. Yeah, it is a lot of money. Do you know that these people actually get, a lot of these people actually get health benefits as well? If you wonder why we're in a pension problem, that's it right there. Now, what we have is, you'll hear these terms, defined benefit or defined contribution. When you, most of you that aren't working for government, when you put money aside, say you decide, I'm going to put $500 aside, or $100 or $200, $5,000, whatever you can afford. You're putting a certain amount aside each month for your retirement. That's called a defined contribution. What you get out of that at the time of retirement is just a crapshoot. It just depends on how your investments work out. If you got an investment advisor, how good they did. And you take out however much you want to take out when you arrive at retirement age, etc. And how much you take out depends on how much you think you can afford to take out and during the time that you're going to still be on the earth, right? The way this works is just the opposite. The state unions negotiated a defined benefit. That means we guarantee a person a certain pay while they're working, and then when they retire, we also guarantee a certain pay that they're going to get for the rest of their life, whether there's enough money to pay for it or not. Isn't that interesting? Now, if you don't save up enough money to pay for your retirement, then you need to go out and take another job, right? Or do something to sell your house or downsize or sell some things, right? You have to figure that out on your own. But the state workers, we don't want to put that responsibility on them, so we've created this thing where it's a defined benefit. So people get 21,000 are getting $100,000 or more per month, per year for the rest of their life. Now, how does that shake down locally? Let's talk about, first of all, earnings. Yuba County, Sutter County, Marysville, and Yuba City. I just picked 4 entities. All of them are in trouble financially. You might say, like there was an article in the paper said, Scott Mitnick, the new administrator of Sutter County, said, it's a status quo budget. Listen, there's nothing status quo when you're going broke. Status quo means we ain't changing much. They need to change something, but they're cowards over there. So in Yuba County, 197, there's like around 1,020 workers in Yuba County as of 2016. This is working for the county of Yuba. 197 of those people earn more than $100,000 in pay and benefits a year. 197 earn that. 50 of the 1,021 workers earn $145,678 to $277,207. We're just talking earnings here right now. Current earnings 2016. Sutter County, 309 people of 1,093 employees earn over $100,000 a year. Thinking about that, when you see all these workers over there at Sutter County, 309 of them earn more than $100,000. Not bad, right? Now, the idea of public employees originally was you wouldn't really get laid off from the public sector. The pay wasn't maybe as great as in the private sector, but you at least had a retirement and steady work. But now they make way more than the average person does in the private sector doing the same work, and they have a phenomenal pension plan. So in Sutter County, 309 employees earn $100,000 or more, and 68 of the 1,093 workers earn $150,000 to a top of $409,000. Now, the highest paid people in Sutter County are all psychiatrists working over there at Sutter County, or Sutter Yuba Mental Health. Even though it's Sutter Yuba Mental Health, they show up under the payroll of Sutter County. Their pay is shared by Yuba County. Now let's look at Marysville. Did you know that there's 50-some employees in Marysville? full-time employees pretty much. They show more employees, and they finally, we kept complaining that they weren't on the Transparent California. Finally, they filed for the first time. They turned in their report to Transparent California. So there are 2016 names and statistics for Marysville. But typically, they tell me that there's a little over 50 employees. Do you know how many of the employees of Marysville actually love Marysville so much are willing to live there? The chief won't even live there. The previous chiefs didn't even live there. It's such a despicable place. They think they can manage the policing of Marysville from afar, just through an app on their smartphone. So 12 people in the city of Marysville, 12 employees. Did I tell you just 3 of 50-some employees decided they could live in Marysville? Just 3. 12 people on that payroll earn $100,000 to $155,000 a year. Now, Yuba City hasn't turned in their 2016 records yet. I don't know why. But they show 505 employee records. Some of those people may be part-time. We have 142 employees in the city of Yuba City that earn from $100,000 to $304,000. In other words, 142 employees earn over $100,000. Let's say it a different way. The rest of them earn under $100,000, right? 75 Yuba City employees earn over $150,000 a year. And the top employee earns $304,000. I believe that's probably Pete Daly, the fire chief. It's amazing. The fire department, when you add their overtime, now Pete Daly doesn't have overtime. He's a salaried employee. Pretty amazing stuff. We're talking earnings here. Let me just give you an example of a few other people. When you look at most departments in the county of Sutter, or most departments, you can look at, they're not functioning very well. In fact, the county of Sutter, the welfare department's a train wreck. Deputy Director of Welfare and Social Services, Lisa Soto, I don't even know whether Lisa Soto's still around, $164,000 she made. General Services Director, this is Megan Greavy, who couldn't even pull off a car purchase for the district attorney's office in 2-year period. She gets almost $190,000 in pay and benefits. Lori Hara, who is Assistant Director of Health and Human Services, gets over $200,000. Not bad, huh? Hopefully we'll be able to look at some of those performance indicators. So that's earnings. But let's look at what you, as a person that resides in one of these jurisdictions. Now, I know we got people up in Butte County. I mentioned earlier, for those in Butte County, I saw where you just laid off 79 of your people. Now, why did you have to do that? The reason is people are being paid too much in salary and benefits. It's just simple. Are they worth it? Oh, they're probably worth twice that, right? Why argue that point? The question is, can we afford them? What can we afford to pay public employees? And do we need as big a government as we have? So we probably need to shrink government, subcontract things out, and reduce the cost. Reduce how much we're paying people. If people don't like it, they can always try to do better. I get a kick out of people that say, like, I always get a kick out of these attorneys that work for the district attorney's office or county council, and they say, well, hell, we can go make lots more money elsewhere. I say, hey, don't let the door hit you in the rear end on the way out. If you want to go out there and hustle and not be paid, it's not so much what you charge people, it's whether they'll actually pay you. I've been in business for years. People I've done hard work for just didn't pay me. Local businesses, still in business today, just totally didn't pay me. Go out there and try to do that private attorney type stuff. Just get it on, dude. Make all the money, make $500,000 a year. I don't care. I'll be happy for you. So when you look at the pensiontracker.org, You can look it up, Pension Tracker, TRACKER.org. Check it out. So here's the thing you got to pay attention to. They have an actuarial list and a market list. The actuarial list, the figures are based on the CalPERS making 7.5% a year on their investments. They haven't done that 20 years. Then it looks at the market rate of 3.25%. They haven't done that. But I'm going to give you the figures of what you owe in these jurisdictions for your pensions in your jurisdictions based on 3.25% earnings a year on CalPERS. So in Yuba County, Robert Bendorf says we can't keep doing that. Robert says, he says this. He said we're bringing in more tax dollars. Our budgets, our income's going up, but he calls it the cost of doing business. I understand the term. It's an accurate way to say it. So but a fair question is, what part of the cost of doing business keeps going up? And the answer is pensions, benefits, and health. We got to change that. So if you live in Yuba County, there's about 70,000 people out there, but per household, not per person. Your pension debt, if today we all had to share it to get us totally out of debt, I'm one of them, you would have to pay $14,500 per household pension debt that we don't have the money to pay. That's the problem in Yuba County. When you look at Yuba City, it's less. It's about $9,700 per household pension debt that the city does not have the money to pay. Marysville, $9,100. Sutter County, $7,500 per household. We don't have the money to pay it. What we need to do is have a system where we set money aside, and that's once you set it aside for that person, that's all they get. So what San Diego did is when they were all going broke because of these incestuous agreements between politicians and the union. And finally, the voters down there that go back and forth between liberal and conservative, they voted in a few conservatives, and they voted in a guy that was a police guy, retired police guy, who said, we can't do this. Even though he's a part of the police union, he said, we can't continue to do this, and I'm stopping pension spiking. And they put a proposition on the ballot called Proposition B to change the way that they fund retirement in the city. Now, politicians will talk you blue in the face. They just keep saying the old union rhetorical crap. Oh, we can't do that. That's illegal. See, CalPERS is operating like a communist government. They say that once you commit to CalPERS, you can't get out of it. And then they say if you try to get out of it, you got to pay 100% of your debt. You got to front it to us. You can't pay it off in time. So when Proposition B passed in San Diego, then the unions, what do you think the unions did? They took them to court. They took them to court multiple times, and they won. The city won multiple times, and they got what they wanted. So now they put everybody on 401k plans. If you don't know that term, it's no big deal. Let's just say it a different way. They said, listen, if you come to work for us, we will contribute this amount of money to a retirement plan in your name. And when you quit working for us, whatever that has in it, you get. But we are not paying a nickel more when you walk out that door. That's all you get is the money that's set aside for you every month. And when you walk out that door, you're on your own, baby, just like in the private sector. It's called a 401k plan, and hopefully the investments work out for you. So what they did is they said the people that are employed by us of a certain date in 2012, all those people that are still employed, we will continue to, you can stay on the CalPERS. But any new hires are going 401k, and we'll pay off the rest of the folks that are just hanging around living out there. We're stuck with them, so we'll pay for their debt. So that's what they're doing. Now, the fact is that so to work for the city of San Diego was not as lucrative when they went to this new system. So the union said, well, you're not going to be able to attract enough cops and firefighters to work for the city. And so the first year they did have a slightly higher turnover rate. You know, every year people leave one jurisdiction and go to another jurisdiction. It's turnover rate, attrition. But ever since after the first year, they've had normal turnover. But the fact is that they're paying a lot less for their firefighters and cops than they were before, or the fact compared to the other 16 or 17 cities in San Diego County. So that's why the union said, well, people are just going to leave San Diego and go to these other cities. Now, maybe because San Diego's such a beautiful city that people like to work there, and they got a leg up on the rest of us compared to Marysville, Yuba City, Yuba County, etc. I don't know. Here's the fact. It doesn't really matter. The issue is, what can you afford? What can people afford to pay? Do people like their public servants? I think generally, yeah, if they do a good job for them. Do people like police officers and firefighters? I think they do. The question is, what can we afford? And at some point, I remember Larry Munger responded to, I think it was an article I wrote or something I said about the ridiculous pension increase. And his comment was, well, hell, you know, we got to compete with all these other agencies up and down the state. Listen, at some point you have to say, we can't afford to pay these salaries or pensions. And so if people aren't going to be able to work for us, they're not going to be able to work for us. Or if they say, oh, well, you know, the union says the same old crap. We're just going to be a training department, and as soon as they get trained and get some credentials as a firefighter, they're going to go and work for somebody that pays more. Listen, let me just help you with this. There isn't a city out there that ain't going to crash if they don't make a change. And to sit there and to kick the can down the road, which is what Robert Bendorf is suggesting to the supervisors, and what Robert and what Scott Mitnick over in Sutter County is doing by just ignoring it and not recommending a change, it's crazy. And so you can say, oh, well, we're going to lose cops. You know, they'll go to work for the state of California. Yeah, they may go to work for the state of California. See, here's the deal. The state of California is not going to bail out any of these municipalities. And so until there's a change at the state level, you know, it's the favorite thing for the city council and the board of supervisors to do is blame the state. Oh, the state. Oh, the state. Well, the state, yeah, they did this. They did that. Listen, at some point you have to take responsibility for your own jurisdiction and figure out a way to change it. That's what San Diego did. They didn't wait for the state. They just, we're going broke. We need to fix this. And they need to, if it means fighting a battle in court, we need to fight a battle in court. We'll be right back for our last half hour.
A case that will likely have huge implications for the future of religious liberty is making its way to the nation's highest court. Before recessing for the summer, the Supreme Court announced it would hear the case of Masterpiece Cake Shop versus the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. The question before the court has nothing to do with cakes or civil rights for that matter. At issue is whether the government can force a private citizen, such as a photographer, florist, or cake designer, to use their artistic talents to endorse or celebrate an event that violates their religious beliefs. This story started back in 2012, when two men filed a complaint with the state of Colorado after Jack Phillips, a cake artist and the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop, declined to make a cake for an event celebrating their same-sex wedding. Another local cake shop agreed to design and bake such a cake, but as it turns out, getting a cake wasn't really the issue. Phillips had no problem making cakes for gay customers, celebrating a birthday, for example, but baking a wedding cake would force him to participate in something that his religious faith opposes. So despite what you'll hear from the American Civil Liberties Union and many pro-gay organizations, this was not about discriminating against people based on their sexual orientation. As stated in other interviews and court documents, Phillips for years declined to use his artistic talents to design and create any cakes, not just those involving same-sex marriage, that violate his religious beliefs. This includes cakes celebrating Halloween, atheism, and racism. It also includes cakes with sexually suggestive images, which may explain why he doesn't take orders for bachelor parties. He also doesn't sell any products containing alcohol. And now, after lower courts in Colorado ruled he must create cakes that celebrate same-sex ceremonies and re-educate his staff, Phillips has decided to stop making wedding cakes altogether. That's not only $100,000 in income this small business lost in 1 year, it's the main reason Phillips has gone from employing 15 people in his community to only 6. The plaintiffs in this case will argue this is all about bigotry towards gay people. But what is actually on trial is the First Amendment. How the Supreme Court rules will determine whether religious liberty is still the law of the land, or whether the government can force someone to violate their religious beliefs, all in the name of tolerance.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about pensions here. And it's like pensions for cities and counties, state, is like a terminal illness. Going to the doc, not feeling so hot, checks you over, looks at your blood. I remember when my dad went in and said, feel like I got the flu, need to go get a checkup. Went in, pulled a little shot of blood out of him, said, the party's over, you'll be dead in a month. You're sicker than a dog, you got leukemia. He was dead in 30 days. That's what this is happening. To look at this any other way is not doing your service to the public. If you're in public office, you're not a public servant. You're not serving the public by going through the routine, showing up at your little council meetings or board of supervisors and voting this, voting that, voting this, voting that, going home, eating your pork chop. It ain't working. If you can't do the job, if you can't make a change, you need to get out of there, because this is terminal. You think, oh, it's not terminal. Yeah, this will work, that'll work. No, it's going to be terminal. So one of the things that needs to change is there needs to be a different way to negotiate with the public employee unions. I had an email exchange with a young woman, very nice person, works for Sutter County, and there was somebody had quit who was the traditional negotiator on behalf of the county to negotiate with the union, and he quit. And there was a thought that maybe Scott Mitnick, the administrator, was going to negotiate, and that isn't right, because he's actually a beneficiary of the negotiations. So there was a dust-up over it, and so this I was included somehow in the email loop, which wasn't my choice, but I got in on watching the discussion. And so I just thought, I'm going to ask this woman a question. I said, we have a negotiator representing the county, and we have a negotiator representing the union. Who actually represents the people who are going to pay the bill? And I'm telling you, it's like I was speaking in Japanese. She just didn't get it. And she said, well, some of the money paying for this doesn't come from the taxpayers. Some of it comes from grants. I said, yeah, but what about what is coming from the taxpayers? Who's representing the taxpayers? The fact is, nobody's representing the taxpayers. So the second thing, so the first thing is we need to have a different approach to negotiating with the unions. And we need to be able to say, we can't afford to do this anymore. Unless you don't want to get your pension, we need to change the way we're paying you, and that we need to change the pension system. And if we need to go to a vote of the public, we need to go to the vote of the public like the San Diego people did. The second thing is, if public employees want to keep their current benefits, they got to contribute the extra dollars to do it instead of coming out of the pocket of the taxpayers. Because the rest of the counties falling apart falling totally to hell in a handbasket, while pensioners are off sitting around a lake somewhere or moved to a different community and not even spending that money here. So you think, well, we shouldn't have to just stay in. Yeah, I don't think you should have to stay around here either, but we shouldn't have to pay. To me, if a person retires and leaves Yuba City, the Yuba City resident should never have to spend another nickel on them. It should be over. Boom, it's over. They're gone, and you got a new employee. And it all should, in other words, people ought to live according to their means. If we can afford a new set of tires on that car, we pay for it. If we can't, we don't borrow the money. Like the city of Marysville just went out after tagging everybody for an extra percent, $1.5 million a year, now went out and borrowed another $1 million to buy 19 brand new police cars. When they didn't have to do that, they could have just gone with the county of Yuba, and Steve Durfer, the sheriff, could have handled the city without buying any 19 new police cars. And one of the city council people was so amazing, said, well, actually, buying them as a lease was cheaper than buying them outright. That shouldn't even have been that's like a straw man argument. Which is best? The best thing is not to buy any of them, or buy a couple at a time if you're going to stick with the same police department. Number 3, we need to end all pension spiking and calculate pensions only on base pay. Not on overtime, not on any spiffs, not on extracurricular work. Number 4, limit the amount of pensions that can be received to no more than 1.5% a year. Now people are getting 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 3. Why do people need so much money to retire on? Yeah, I know they deserve it. Yeah, I know they're worth it. But when you retire, technically, you've raised all your kids. You should own your home. Your expenses shouldn't be as big as they used to be. You should be able to tap into Medicare when you get to be 65, right? We should be able to reduce the amount. You should be able to live on less. If you can't, then don't be a public employee. Why should public employees make 2 and 3 times the retirement amount that private sector people who actually end up paying the backfill in these accounts to pay these exorbitant amounts? It has nothing to do with how much we like them or worth. It has to do with what can be afforded. We need to increase the age when retirees can receive pensions to at least 55. In other words, hey, highway patrol guys do 30 years, then wait for 5 years to collect. Have some savings. You can retire at 50, but just don't collect till later. Just like you can quit work under Social Security, you don't have to work. You can wait. You can quit work at 55 and start collecting Social Security at 65 or whatever it is nowadays. Reduce the size of pensions to a set amount not to exceed $100,000 a year. Just like, hey, we're not going to pay any more than $100,000 a year. I don't care whether you made $400,000 or $500,000 as a psychiatrist in the prisons. Like, hey, you made yours. Hope you saved it. Hope you invested well. God bless you and all that stuff, but we're not going to pay more than $100,000 in the state of California to anybody. Eliminate all double dipping when retired employees can start a new pension program by taking a second job after they retire at 50. This is very true with law enforcement and firefighters. Reduce medical benefits and even eliminate all medical benefits for pensions that exceed amounts where there's plenty of income to pay for those services. Why would we pay health benefits for a guy that's making $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year? They could set an amount like $100,000. That's, you pay your own health. Change pensions altogether to 401k. The CalPERS plan isn't working. I was just talking to John Dukes called me. He ran for supervisor to compete with Larry Munger, or not Larry Munger, for I can't remember the seat, District 1 up in the Live Oak area. And he lost, but he's on the, he called to say he read my pension article. He said, Lou, I think it's a good article. And he said, I'm on the mosquito abatement district board of directors. And he said, we had the same problem there. We're paying those type of pension, defined benefit. And we were connected, although we're not the same as the municipalities with CalPERS. We're kind of connected, tapped into them, but we decided as a board to get out and to do 401ks. where we pay in a certain amount. People know when they come to work for us how much we're going to pay in, and that's it. That's all they get, and they know that going in. And so that's another way that's another change. And finally, if public employees are unwilling to make these kind of sacrifices so the cities and counties can thrive, they can go work elsewhere, and we'll get new workers. And, that isn't a staggering thought, because if you've lived long enough, you'll remember when President Reagan was faced with a massive, I want you to think of all the air traffic controller operations in the United States. And they had a union, or they have a union, and they could not come to agreement on their new salaries when Ronald Reagan was president. And so the air traffic controller says, if you don't agree to our demands, we're going to go out on strike. Well, that's the huge thing when you're talking about all the air traffic throughout the United States. This isn't like Air Force air traffic. This is like public air traffic. And so Ronald Reagan, you could look it up on YouTube, and you can see his statement on YouTube. I should have brought it today, but I didn't get around to it. It's a very brief statement. He just said, if you go out on strike, we will replace you. And they went out on strike, and they never returned to their jobs again. It was over, and they replaced them, and that settled that. I don't think there ought to be hard feelings about it. I've seen firefighters and cops get really kind of gnarly. I remember when we had a downturn in the economy in the recession, 2006, 7, and 8, and it just continued on. And when Steve Jepson was the city manager of Yuba City, they just said, we promise you increases, but we can't do it. We just don't have we don't have the money. In other words, the city doesn't sell anything. The county doesn't sell anything. It just sucks money. I don't know if you're really quiet at night, you can hear that sucking sound of the dollars coming out of people's bank accounts. And so he just said, hey, the pie is only so big, and it ain't so hot right now with sales taxes, which is primarily funding the city of Yuba City. And he said, we can't honor that increase. I'm sorry. And firefighters got pissed off, and cops got pissed off. Did that mean they weren't getting paid? No, everybody got paid. I said at a dinner one time, I was having dinner with Station 3, and a couple of the young firefighters were really upset. And they said, hey, we don't deserve this. I thought, whoa, you mean you're not getting paid? Oh, no, we're getting paid. They were making over $100,000 a year. And these guys are in their 20s. They said, hey, we're college graduates. I said, all right. How much you get? How much you getting? You're getting health benefits still, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're working 10 days a month, 24-hour shifts. Yeah, got that. And you got the health benefits, and you're still getting paid what you were getting paid. Yeah. And I told him, I said, where I work, we had to lay off half the staff because we're short of money. They don't get any health benefits. They don't get jack. It's easy to get spoiled. I remember the union, the employees union, firefighters, the chief left it up to the firefighters on whether they were going to take a cut in pay or black out a fire department. One fire station, a shift would not be used. And so the firefighters, the young firefighters, chose to black out a shift. The old firefighters chose to cut their own salaries. It was fascinating because I didn't interview them, but just in chats over coffee, I interviewed some of the older firefighters. They said, Lou, honestly, when we got into this business, we used to work a second job when we were in our 20s to afford to be a firefighter. On our days off, we would work another job. And he says, now the pay is so phenomenal, we're just totally blown away that we get as much money as we get to do this job. One of the greatest jobs in the world. But the new firefighters, it's sort of the spirit of the entitlement mentality, right? Doesn't mean they're bad people, just they came out thinking different. And so they began to think that $250,000 a year, when you add up overtime and benefits, even though they didn't get the raise that they were promised in the union negotiations, They weren't getting paid fairly because the operation in Citrus Heights or Roseville or Rockland, oh, if they went over there, they could get this and that. Well, maybe everybody should go over there for a while and let some other firefighters in here that get paid little and they want to live here. Not everybody wants to live in Yuba Sutter. But those are some decisions we have to make. And honestly, the challenge to me, will the politicians be the leaders they claim they were? When they ran all those campaigns and bought the 4x8 placards and handed out the brochures and spoke in front of the Chamber of Commerce and the Tea Party and touted this and touted that, and I was going to do this and we need to do that, and I'm telling you what, all that don't mean jack. If they don't solve this pension issue, all that other stuff is just frivolous stuff. It's like the old cliche, are we just going to, the Titanic's going down and you're worrying about moving some deck chairs around. I'm telling you, the big issue here is pensions. And now they want to go and just tap in. Oh, yeah, let's just get more tax from the taxpayers. Yeah, let's tell them this. Let's do this. Let's screw the taxpayers again. Yeah, taxpayers are tired of getting screwed in California. And we're getting tired of local politicians blaming the state and the federal government. You know what I was impressed with? Geez, let me see if I can find it. We're almost out of time. I was impressed by this. And we need more of the spirit of this. Shasta County Sheriff Tom Bosenko, Bosenko, made it very clear that he has no plans to send deputies out to enforce the law. Did that get your attention right there? California now has a ban on high-capacity magazines. That's not paper magazines, folks that don't own a gun. That's like a part of the gun that holds the bullets. High-capacity containers for you out in Olivehurst. So he says, Bosenko said, we're not going to be knocking on anybody's door looking for high-capacity magazines. So take your legislative crap and shove it. Bosenko said that the new law effectively makes law-abiding citizens into criminals. So listen, why don't we get a little Bosenko spirit into these city council members and supervisors and stand up for what the local taxpayer. Now, we got Sean Harris, who I like. Sean Harris is a highway patrol commander. I think he's respected amongst his workers. He's been kind to me and Tip. But Sean, it's time to take a stand and for the survival. Now, you're now a city council person. That's different than a highway patrol. And so now you have to make a decision that benefits the people of the city of Yuba City. It's the same way with old Manny Cardozo over there, who I think was supported by the unions. So Manny, are you going to make a decision for the citizens of Yuba City or the union? Are you a sellout to the union? Or are you going to stand up against the union and make a decision for the citizens of the jurisdiction you were elected for? Supervisors, same. You took all that union money. I remember Barbara LeVake. She took in $170,000, a shocking amount, like 3 times as much of an average county supervisor campaign. A lot of that money came from unions. You think she's going to vote against the union? Doubt it. You know, this is a critical time. We're at a crossroads in every one of these jurisdictions, and the smart people will make the decision sooner than later to turn this Titanic around, because this thing's going down. And I appreciated the city finance person, Robin Battaglia, making that clear. And according to Auditor Controller Nathan Black, who I haven't talked to one-on-one about this, but my understanding is he said we can make this change in Sutter County. But the politicians, the Auditor Controller, is not going to be able to make that decision for them. That's what the supervisors are there to do. They need to get up and quit just like sleepily going to the meeting and taking whatever Scott Mitnick says and voting that way. They need to say, we need to make this change. And I wasn't involved in the vector mosquito abatement. I didn't follow that decision, but I know that on the local board, you can make radical decisions and save the county, the city, or individual school districts or whatever a lot of money. Now, all these school districts got the same thing. This CalSTRS is going down. And pretty soon they're not going to be, you think, oh, well, in school districts, they don't have roads. They don't have sewers. What they have are classrooms and kids to take care of. And what happens when pretty soon you're better off keeping your kid out of school and teaching them yourself because there's no money for labs. There's no money for sports. There's no money for music. There's no money for new books. There's no money for anything. They're going to ask you to come out of your pocket to take care of your kids at school. We're going to be like a third world country with really great public employees, great salaries, and great pensions, and everybody else just taking on water. It isn't working. So Tom Basinko, the sheriff of Shasta County, just said, we're not going to turn law-abiding citizens into criminals. I like this spirit where the local people, you know something, the state, the counties and the cities are not here to serve the state. The state was created to serve cities and counties. Did you know that? Did you know that people came into the uncharted territory we now call California and began to reside here and have a living? Started farming, started little towns, started little settlements. And then they created cities, and then eventually they organized an area called California into a state to protect and support the cities, not the other way around. We got it backwards. So California banned the sale of high-capacity magazines in 2010, but the state government allowed Californians who already owned such magazines to maintain possession of them. In 2016, Democrat lawmakers pushed through a ban that covered possession of magazines also. Now, if you got a high-capacity magazine, you're a criminal. You got to voluntarily turn it in, according to Governor Brown. Hey, screw Governor Brown. I hope the sucker drops dead tomorrow. I'm sick of him. I've been sick of him for years. I'm just tired of him. I feel the same. I don't want anybody to take his life. I'm just tired of him. I'm tired of Obama. I'm tired of his baloney. They're liars. They manipulate. They rip people off. So the new ban on high-capacity magazines for all you gun owners, effective today. Is it today, July 1? Is today July 1? It's effective today. So you're now a criminal. It removes large-capacity magazines from the state. And they're going to come and destroy all the large-capacity magazines. I wonder if Sheriff Durfee or Sheriff Parker in Yuba and Sutter County are going to do that. So we're supposed to surrender all large-capacity magazines to law enforcement agency for destruction. I had a guy the other day gave me a bunch of ammo he found in his dad's house. His dad died. And he says, hey, can you take this to the Marysville Police Department for destruction? I said, you mind if I give it to my friends who might need it to shoot somebody? He said, no, go ahead. So I said, fine. So I gave it to my friends. I'm not taking it into no police department for destruction. You know, this whole thing, this Second Amendment, the reason we got to keep guns, our founding fathers, because they feared that the government was going to do us wrong. It wasn't to go hunting. They figured, hey, everybody needs to hunt and kill something to eat. It wasn't for that. It was to shoot people with the government in case the government became tyrannical. Get a clue. Go read something. You know something? I saw this clip. I was going to play it today. And people interviewed, and they asked them down in Oceanside what the reason for the 4th of July was. Nobody can even answer it. We become a nation of stupid. We've all taken the stupid pill. So anyway, Bob Day the other day told me I'd done him wrong. And he said, I kept telling everybody that Bob Day keeps running too many leftovers or reruns. So I told him I was going to make an apology because he actually doesn't do that on whatever holiday that was we just came through. He actually did a special pre-recorded program to soupty-doopty it, to do you right, and I called it a rerun. So today, I could see him lurking around the studio here, and I want to stay on the right side of him. So you're going to get a fresh, live show from Mr. Bob Day here in a couple minutes. So, but anyway, he doesn't always run reruns when he can't be here. There you have it. I corrected my statement forever and ever, amen, so I made everything right. Are we done? The Chief, we're all right? So, okay. By the way, did you know that Mr. Becerra, who is the Attorney General, just got his case thrown out against the undercover film people that exposed Planned Parenthood, but now he's forbidding anybody who works for the state to fly to a bunch of different states. You know, it's a communist state now. Now you can't go to states on company business if he feels like they're persecuting transsexuals and stuff. Texas is one of them. So, but I can't get into that. You'll have to study it on your own. The party's over. Bob Day's coming to talk.